Keeping with a lot of the soft hackles that I've been doing, we're doing another one this week. This is called the Winter Brown. I'm still tying up soft hackles, getting ready for a tie-a-thon in May. There's information in the description down below about that tie-a-thon if you're interested. There's also a post on my website, dressedirons.com, talks about what a tie-a-thon is, and this particular one, some more information there as well. This week's fly is the Winter Brown. Another fly that I found in Sylvester Nemes' book, 2 Centuries of Soft-Hackled Flies. I found this to be an interesting pattern because one, it uses woodcock in the collar, and as well it has a peacock herl head. And as it turns out, unbeknownst to me, that a number of what are called Yorkshire flies, and I'm assuming that's because most of them originated or are fished mostly on the Yorkshire River. It's very common to have a peacock herl head on the fly. You see heads like this on freshwater streamers as well as on some Atlantic salmon flies, things like that, but not too often have I run across them on soft hackle flies. So I thought this would be an interesting fly to do. But it's a interesting fly, interesting book if you're into soft hackles and want to read the book by Sylvester Nemes. There's a link down in the description. Also, he mentions in that book that this fly is from a book called North Country Flies by T.E. Pritt. And that book, North Country Flies, was published in the late 1800s. Has this fly in it, and it talks a little bit about the Yorkshire flies and so on. So it's a good book, interesting read, very interesting flies, and that's the Winter Brown, and we'll get started. First step in tying our Winter Brown is to place our hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3906B in a size 14. Traditionally a 3906, which is a little shorter shanked, or a 3399, which is even a lighter wire, would be the hook to use. I prefer a little bit longer body on a lot of my soft hackles, so that's what I'm using. I'm going to debarb the hook using some traditional Pearsall's silk in orange for this. Because of that, I want to go ahead and wax it. It gives it, helps it a little bit stronger, makes it a little bit stronger, and it also helps it to grip the materials a little bit more. So I'm just taking some Vineyard's tying wax and running my thread through the wax a couple of times. And then I'm going to run the wax through my fingers just to smooth it off a little bit. We'll start our thread right behind the eye of the hook. And I want to keep nice touching turns as I work down the hook shank, getting a base layer of thread. Winter Brown's a real simple pattern. The body itself is nothing but the tying silk. It does have an interesting rib that is also the tying silk. A lot of times these flies, if they're like partridge and yellow, will have the body as the tying silk, but it's usually 2 layers of tying silk. This one, at least from what I could tell from the photograph in the book by Sylvester Nemes, it has a rib on it that is the tying silk. All I'm doing here is I'm twisting my bobbin. I'm giving it a clockwise twist, and that is simply to twist up the silk thread real well so that when I wrap this forward, I'll have a pronounced rib on the body of the fly. Get about 5 wraps in, and I'm going to stop with my thread about 2 eye widths behind the eye of the hook. Because we're palmering in a hackle on the soft hackle, and we're going to have about 4 wraps of Peacock Herl as the head, we want to leave a little bit more room for that hackle. I am now counter spinning the bobbin just a little bit to get some of that twist out of it. The hackle on the winter brown is from a Woodcock wing. It's actually a covert feather, under wing covert feather, right in here, the lighter ones. You could essentially use some darker ones if you want, but the recipe calls for the lighter underwing feathers. So you'll select a feather, and we want to have the barbs on this about a hook length long is about what I generally like. That's about right. Peel away the excess. Take my hackle pliers. I'm going to grab the tip. I don't need a lot of barbs for this collar because it's a fairly sparse collar on this. A lot of soft hackles are fairly sparse. I'll trim away the tip just to leave a little bit of a triangle there to anchor this with. Watch your thread wraps. I'll get about 4 wraps to hold that tip down and then bring it back about the middle. Then I'll be in position to tie that hackle off when I palmer this in. Probably only get a couple of wraps. I may not even get 2 on this, and that's fine. As I said, these tend to be sparse collars on these soft hackles. If I can get a hold of the hackle with my pliers, yeah, see, I just barely got 2 wraps in there. I'll bring my thread over the stem, releasing it from my hackle pliers. I'm going to bring it over the stem 2 more times, making certain I don't have any of the hackle fibers trapped. And then I'm going to trim away the rest of the feather, running down to the eye of the hook to smooth that out a little bit and back up. That just gives me a nice smooth area for the Peacock Herl. I'm just simply using some strung Peacock Herl. When you select a single Herl out of this, a lot of times because they're strung together, the bottom section of it here gets kind of damaged and isn't very usable. So I'm going to trim off the bottom portion of that so that this is the section that I'll be actually wrapping in, and it's nice and clean and what I'm after. Wrap that in, smoothing that off as I head down to the eye of the hook. And then I'll start to palmer this in. Careful, these are fairly delicate. Generally, I only get about 4 or 5 wraps of this Herl in. If it's the Herl's thick and very full, you may not get that much, or if it's a little sparser, you might get 5 or 6. I'll put a couple wraps in to secure that, and then working from the eye back, I'm just going to put in a few wraps to start a small head. 3 or 4 turn whip finish. Just put in enough to cover up any stray herls, I should say barbules, and then we can trim away the thread. This rest of this herl can pop right off. And that is your winter brown. One thing you want to be careful with on these, a lot of your soft hackles, they're designed to have the collars kind of be more perpendicular to the hook shank. It's very easy to crowd the eye on this, not leaving yourself room for the thread, plus wrapping those herls in such a manner that they tend to compress and push those hackle fibers down. But take your time with it. Having a longer shanked hook helps with that, to kind of figure that out, get those proportions down. That is the winter brown. Very interesting fly. I imagine if you don't have woodcock, you could use some Hungarian partridge. Doing a little bit of research, I actually found a number of people that have mentioned that they tie it with Hungarian partridge. And actually in T.E. Pritt's book on North Country flies, he mentions that using a covert feather from inside of a hen pheasant's wing also will work. So you don't have to have exactly like the book says. Use what you have. Just have some fun with it. That is the winter brown. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.